Susan and I are excited to have part 2 of our developmental workshop. The plan for today, just to kind of recap and remind you of last time, we reviewed development overall in the preschool age range, common diagnoses, and starting to think a little bit more about how we might structure that therapy. So for today, our goal is to get more into the meat of that, talk about interventions with preschoolers. We're going to talk specifically about procedures here at Catalpa, what we'll do with actually triaging our cases, and then we'll break for lunch and have a therapist panel of therapists who have been working with this age range, and just kind of open time for discussion and Q&A about therapy and anything else you might specifically have. So all of you by now should hopefully have a folder that has some resources in it. We'll refer to it throughout the training this afternoon. You should have gotten a CE certificate. That's one certificate that is 4 hours for both this training and the one before it. And then you should have also gotten the slides for today. So this is just a little reflection to get us all in the mood. So it says, intuitively one would think that if the child has a problem, the therapy should be focused on the child. But if a child has allergies, the problem is with the child, but the solution is in working with the environment. You might get rid of the carpet or the drapes or find a new home for the cat. We can do things with the environment to help kids behave better. This is a quote from Andrew Asman, who's a developmental pediatrician in New York. So I really liked this quote because I think it emphasizes, this allergy analogy emphasizes that sure, there are things we can do with the actual child, right? You know, maybe medication could potentially be an option, but there also is a lot that needs to be changed with regard to the environment, and focusing on that and having parents or caregivers be a central piece of that too. So I think in all of the interventions and the strategies that we're going to be discussing today, those parents are the ones that really play an important piece in this, and so we're going to be talking about really trying to get their buy-in and ways to do that. So with that being said, I'm going to pass things off to Susan. Yep.
So to follow up on that analogy with the environment is what we're kind of targeting. We're going to be calling this parent training intervention specifically. And that's not an uncommon thing. They call it PTI in the literature. So we're going to be looking at this as the research-supported approach to working with this age population, focusing on the interventions we can provide with parents being involved in the treatment as the most effective way to really target most of these child mental health problems. We're going to be really looking at kind of 3 areas. We're looking at assessing in the first few sessions how the parents feel about their parenting, how they feel about their relationship with their child at this point, given that these problems have probably been going on for a while at the point that we're seeing them. And then looking specifically at those parent-child interactions that we observe, that's reported to us, and so forth. And we're going to really get into that a lot more this first hour. So the emphasis in these PTIs are going to be strengthening their relationship, getting them feeling better about their parenting, and then promoting those more positive parent-child interactions that they'd like to have. To accomplish that, we're going to be looking at psychoeducation, really looking at what they expect from their child, making sure they have age-appropriate expectations and an understanding of their child's developmental level. And then we're going to look at this PCIT, parent-child interaction training, which will include behavior modification, and we'll also be talking about CBT as well. The parent-child interaction training is something that I think some of you incorporate parts of in your current treatment, those that work with kids, and when we get to the panel section, we'll talk more about how that we're looking at trying to incorporate more of that here at Catalpa. But I'm going to start with that, actually, as being our lead-in, because we'd like to use this model more and more with these young children. So the PCIT developed from both attachment and social learning theories. It's divided into 2 set stages, the first part being more child-directed. We're really working on promoting those positive interactions. And the second one being more focused on the behavior modification part. I'm actually going to skip this first video, but I included the link on here because it's only about 1.5 minutes long, And it's a good introduction to this program, but it's just a lady just talking to you, so there's no demonstration of the skills. So I'm going to skip it for now, and I think I have a better video to do an actual demonstration of parts of this program to give a better overview. So in the stage 1, what they call CDI, child-directed interaction, they're really working on helping the parents have a better connection with their kid, with whether it's been anxiety-driven problems, behavior-driven problems. They're really looking to help the parent feel better connected and to their child and their interactions going in a more positive direction. They accomplish this in this program, PCIT, through direct coaching, role-play modeling, and also direct instruction. So I'm going to skip though now to that part, because so in particular, when they're talking about those skills they're teaching during the first however many 6 to 8 sessions, the CDI stage where they're letting the child kind of direct the play, they're teaching the parents the pride skills, which are labeled praise, which you heard her speak of during her coaching section, reflection, imitation, behavioral description, and the E is enthusiasm, excitement, enjoyment. Those are E words. Now as clinicians, you guys are all awesome at doing this. This is what we do every day when we work with kids. We're labeling our praise. But parents aren't naturally always so awesome at these skills. So working with them to try to train them to be able to label their praise, be able to just reflect what their child is doing and describe what they're doing or what they're seeing. And even imitation, like I'm going to make a tower just like yours or something like that. And being enthusiastic about the play that they're trying to enjoy with their child, even if it's just for 5 minutes, which is about maybe as long as they're going to get before the child, particularly dysregulated, starting to like throw toys and making it difficult to just enjoy that play. So the don't part is trying to remember not to use any commands, not to ask questions, not to be criticizing the way that they're playing, or not to engage in teaching at this phase anyway. So this is where we're going to have a little fun, because when you work with kids, you never just talk, right? You always are doing something hands-on and active. So even though I know you guys are good at this, I'm going to make you practice. So I want the person who's the parent to pretend like you don't know how to do these things, so that, or the kid, when you're playing, I want the parent to try to do these things, but the kid can make it a little bit difficult for the parent. You know, maybe try to not play as nicely and see how you guys can handle just trying to follow those do skills when you're playing with them. And remember, I guess we could also do it. I don't think I'll make you do the therapist role of trying to coach the parent at this point, but we'll look at that later. So I'm going to pass these around. If you want to just into pairs, you can switch roles of being the child or being the, and again, this isn't for every parent that walks through our door. These are the ones where you can clearly see that things have gotten to this level of there's a negative relationship. They don't feel good about themselves in their parenting role. They don't feel good about their child anymore. We need to rebuild this. Parents that come in and clearly interact well with their child and feel good about that, this isn't something you're going to need to do with them. And again, the second stage really works at the more behavioral side of things. So after you've improved that relationship, because you can't, it's very difficult to work with parents that are already too negative, that's all that's going on in the home is yelling and punishing and taking away. You're not going to be able to just continue to work on behavioral strategies before you kind of get things looking a little bit more positive. But once you do, or if they already come in and they haven't gotten that negative to begin with, you can go to this point where you're working on more of the behavior management systems to help with making things a little bit more effective in their discipline strategies, trying to get the behaviors to improve. There's another video on here, but I'm a little bit concerned about our time because we have a lot of things to accomplish. So if you want to watch a funny, I thought it was funny anyway, demonstration of those CDI skills and the PDI part, you can watch that later when it's up on the system. So basically, we're going to be trying to incorporate those aspects of that program, PCIT, as much as we can, and as it's needed for the presenting problems that the kids are coming in with. A lot of the problems, though, are usually behavioral, and So I just have this one screen to kind of talk about that. Looking at when the behavior occurs, are we trying to strengthen it or trying to weaken it? And if you can click on my little intro, this is a very short little, I saw it on Facebook the other day and I thought that would be perfect to add. So he titled that video clip instantly.
That doesn't change when we become men.
Right. Oh, there's a thing about the remote. So, and again, it is funny that every time, it does seem like he gives it away, that's no problem, but then he instantly regrets it, like, oh, how did I do that? Again, that kid looks really young, though I don't even know if he's a year old, he's not speaking, so you can't get an idea of how he is standing, so somewhere in there. But what stuck out to me, since I've been working on pulling together this behavior modification screen, is how he is giving him the remote after crying. So again, is that crying now going to be strengthened or weakened after this nice little game he's got going on here? Well, it's hard to say. I'm not going to criticize this video because this kid is obviously still very young. But in an older kid, that would definitely be considered a reinforcer, giving him what he wants. So basically, I try to break this down very simply with parents. You don't want to, they're already overwhelmed with what's going on at home. So sometimes I'll draw this out, sometimes it's just verbally, depends on what I feel like is needed. But basically I want them to see that if we're working on trying to change behavior, we need to weaken the behaviors that we want to decrease and strengthen the ones that we want to increase. And if all they're doing is working on weakening behaviors, that's lopsided. We need to strengthen behaviors that are the positive ones at the same time. They do say, I know you probably can't read it because the screen is too small, but on your handout, the middle part is saying, consistently ignoring a behavior which provides no reinforcement may be enough to extinguish it. But in and of itself, we all know you can't just ignore a child. They will just up the ante until they get your attention. So if your parents are choosing to ignore behavior, they need to be working on where are they going to put their attention. They got to give them attention for something. So they're going to need to, I guess it's a form of redirection, where they get that child's attention away from the negative behavior and they start doing something to get them to do something positive that they can then pay attention to. So really, ignoring children entirely for any length of time is kind of risky without having a plan of action for what they're going to do if they're going to up that ante and scream louder or start throwing things or something like that to try to get your attention. So, and they do incorporate that in the PDI in the video I didn't show you. The child starts throwing the toys and kind of doing more negative behavior. The parent's not supposed to start criticizing or tell them to stop. They haven't reached that part of the treatment. So they instruct the parent to kind of ignore the behavior and start building a tower or doing something with the toys to get the child's interest back on the parent, and then their negative behavior decreases. So the parent does that. He starts a game with I think they had dinosaurs and lizards or something, or people and lizards, and he's having the lizards attack the people, and of course this is supposed to be a little boy, and he's all interested in that, like, what are those lizards doing? Who's eating what? Where's the guts are spilling? What's going on? So he stops slamming things and throwing things and gets back involved, and the parent can now give attention to their child who's now behaving appropriately. So just making sure parents aren't, and as you're kind of assessing the situation, is it too much attention over here on the behaviors you're trying to weaken, and what's going on the positive behavior side? What have they got to reinforce that? So we all know you can use charts and stickers as the types of reinforcement schedules to try to increase daily routine behaviors, chores, things like that. And then the punisher side whether you're adding a punisher like doing chores, or taking away things, which is probably the more common thing that parents do, to decrease behaviors, needs to be in balance with the positive things that they're doing. And the big thing I also too try to recommend or remind parents is that attention is probably their biggest reinforcer. So if there's a behavior that they can't seem to extinguish or make decrease, we have to look at what kind of attention that behavior is getting the child, to see if that's actually what's continuing to reinforce this behavior, because otherwise it should decrease over time if there's nothing to reinforce it. And it's obviously also not this simple as this chart likes to lay it out, because when you're trying to get them to do something positive, oftentimes they do something negative too. So you're kind of balancing that. Do I punish this? And yet still, how am I going to get them to do this? So when you ask your child to pick up the toys and they start throwing a tantrum and kicking the chair, you send them to timeout. Well, guess what? They didn't pick up their toys now. They got 5 more minutes at least. And to a 4, 3-year-old, that might have been worth it because they're all in the moment. So if I can get out and pick up my toys for an extra 5 minutes. So that's probably not the most effective response in that situation if you're trying to strengthen listening to you to pick up those toys. So that would be another great opportunity to maybe ignore, if you can, the tantruming, but make that, what your command was, more engaging. Maybe you start, that's what Transition Magician has been helping me with ideas, but maybe you get out the magic potion. That was the newest one I just read this morning. I've got some magic potion. I'm putting it on my hands. Oh, my hands are going crazy. They can't stop picking up. Look, it's picking up this. And all of a sudden your kid's like, what in the world is going on? And they stop tantruming. And maybe you'll even start helping you to clean up. So you kind of teach them how to do things that are going to result in accomplishing the goal that they set out to do when they first asked the child to pick up the toys. So this is a big one. And that's simplifying it down to operant conditioning, which of course there's a lot more to behavioral strategies, but a lot of times this is a layered thing too. When you peel back the layers of what's reinforcing it, you can get into a lot of deeper things, which can get into family systems things and dysfunctional behaviors like that are reinforcing patterns of behavior in the child. Like I said with attention, I guess. If a parent kind of is out of the picture, but when the child misbehaves, they get all this attention from that missing parent. That can be something that you can get to later in treatment usually. When you're looking at that emotional dysregulation, oh yeah, some of you will not get the PowerPoint. We can often use CBT practices to help kids learn better emotional regulation skills. So again, CBT has a whole big section on all the thoughts and how we modify that for adults and the types of strategies we might use. But for preschoolers, it basically, for me, comes down to the magic triangle, cognitive triad, whatever you want to call this, grouping of thoughts, behaviors, and emotions and how they're connected. And even this is a parent education piece. Your young 3 and 4 and 5-year-old aren't going to think of anything other than, can I play with that? Is that a toy? It's teaching the parents how these 3 things go together. And when we're looking at these young children, we're not going to directly access thoughts or even emotions without teaching them how to communicate those things to us. So the big thing in this age group is working on communication with the kids, building their emotional vocabulary, what happened, what's going to happen next if they're to that developmental level that they can make that kind of prediction. And then modifying the behavior to make changes in their ability to get things to work out and control their emotions. And so the next part is looking at all the tools that kind of help target behavior in kids, developing that communication of their thoughts and their feelings, and building that vocabulary. I did pretty good with that.
Yeah, you rocked it.
Okay, the next part would be to go into the tools, but
So this next part here, we're just going to talk more about triaging cases here at Catalpa. And then after that, we're going to kind of quickly review the ASQ, the Ages and Stages questionnaire. That was something we briefly brought up during our last workshop. So I want to talk a little bit more in detail about the two versions of that we have and ways in which you can use them. And then after that, as Susan mentioned, we have some tools and resources to discuss with the group too. So for triaging cases, the way it will work as currently planned now is that the Access Center is going to do an IE. They're going to gather information just as they typically would. In addition to that information, for all kids that are under 5.5, they're going to administer the ASQ with them as well. And so that ASQ is going to be scored up during the IE. Feedback is going to be given to a family about where a child is falling, particularly if there's any areas of concern that are there. And it's going to be documented in that IE for you to see. We're also going to be, there's an information summary form from the ASQ, and I'll be showing you what that looks like in a minute. But that's going to be scanned into ClinScan, so you guys can see where children are falling on each of the domains of the ASQ as well. So if you have a child that is 5.5 or under, you can expect to see these things already completed by the time they come to you. The questionnaire that the parent is going to fill out, that's the longer checklist with each of the individual items, won't be in EPIC directly, but we'll be putting it in the white paper chart so that if you guys ever want to update the ASQ in the future, you'll be able to look back and see the actual details. Okay. So what happens from there? So if a child is falling below a 4-year-old developmental level, and we'll talk in a little bit about what that means and how we're defining that. But if they're falling below a 4-year-old age equivalency, they're going to be placed with a therapist that's already comfortable and kind of specializes in working with kids that are 3 and under. If they seem like they're developmentally appropriate, so they're seeming like they're 4 and up on their milestones, then we'll be referring to the general clinic. And so how are cases assigned once we decide a case is developmentally appropriate for our general clinic? Well, we're going to have kind of a tiered approach to this. So what intake is going to do is first they're going to look at the therapists that already have a child age range marked within their comfort zone. So remember how you all put down your interests for things and you'll have your preferred age ranges indicated. So this is applying not just to preschoolers now, but say you're seeing like a 7 or an 8-year-old, whatever it might be. If a child is 8, we're going to be looking at the preferred age range and those providers in which that's an option. And then if there's no availability amongst those providers, we'll look and assign that child to kind of anybody generally in the clinic as appropriate. Does that make sense? So we're kind of taking a tiered approach where tiered 1 is those people who have already indicated, hey, I'm comfortable with working with this age range, but also understanding that we get very full sometimes and there might not always be availability, so that opportunity to kind of assign to our general clinic then is needed. And then right now we have it set up so that in that first session, if a child is 6 years old or under, it's a parent-only CE. So for those of you that are used to working with this age range already, this is something that we've been doing and nothing's changing right now with how that looks. So this might be new for those of you who aren't used to seeing this age range. I'm going to talk a little bit more about that CE and the parent-only portion, but before I do that, Mallory, is there anything else that you would add from an intake perspective?
I don't think so. I feel like you kind of summed it up pretty well, unless if there's like specific questions about how we would refer or whatnot, you guys can ask.
I have a question because I just saw a 6-year-old and they came with a parent and I didn't know it should be parent only. So are they told that?
Yeah, and so your process is a little bit different through a PACA because you guys are doing your own intakes.
Okay.
So really, if you're keeping the client, like that's your call, in my opinion. I mean, because they're your clients.
Okay.
So the reason we do it is so that, because we only see people once, we tell the family that it's going to be parent only with a ongoing therapist so that they have the ability to gather more parent information without the client there. They can go over the treatment plan. It just kind of creates a little bit more of like a rapport and a comfort level without maybe bringing a younger dysregulated child. So I would say if you're doing the intake, yeah. So I mean, if you want to follow that process, I think your clinic is a little bit, it's functioning kind of in its own way right now anyway. So I mean, my thought is if you are going to keep the client, I mean, do what makes sense for you.
But
if
then,
that
but
changes.
then we would have to call the parent ahead and tell them not to bring the child.
Well, if you're doing the intake, my assumption would be the child would already be there, correct?
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
I see what
So
you're
then what
talking
we do
about.
is-
So,
Yep.
so clients that are coming here, the intake would be done here, but with us, we're doing the.
If you did your own intake, the
Okay.
child would be coming. And then
Okay,
if you
and then we-
decided you want a parent only, you would just say, hey, next time let's just meet together so we can go over some treatment planning and things like that. If we do the intake and send them your way, if it's a kiddo 6 and under, you'll just get the parent for that first session.
Okay.
Because we follow our kind of standard
Okay, great.
process, so, yeah.
So intake will have the, here in Appleton, will have the parents present, or sorry, of course parents present. We have the child here. It's free for all.
Just the 4-year-old.
But it's that CE, so the treatment therapist first appointment, that's the parent one. So it's a little bit different than.
And I would say that that really helps to set up in the parent's mind that they are going to be a big part of the therapy, that they aren't going to just drop their kids off and go to Woodlands.
Yeah, would you be surprised? So here's a general question I have for you guys that already have the CEs and the parent-only sessions. Are you happy with how that's been going? Is that something you like? Do you have concerns? What are general thoughts?
The only drop off sometimes is that sometimes, and I know Access Center tells them this, they'll still show up with the kid anyway because they think the kid needs to be fixed. And I still stick with it, and say, okay, we're going to go with this today, but the next session really needs to be parents only.
So that becomes a pattern, let us know,
Yeah.
because there's different ways. So what I do is like when I print off their letter, it says in bold like parent only session. So I'll highlight that and be like, remember the next session is parent only. I'll indicate in my notes to the therapist that this is what I discussed. So if that kind of becomes an ongoing issue, let us know so that we can kind of create maybe, if it's a pattern, we probably need to approach it differently. But
And sometimes it's just the mindset of the parent.
right.
Yeah,
I think
They're gonna do
Access
what they're
Center's
gonna
done
do.
everything you can, but
Yeah.
I still, when they come in, nope, we still have to have that parent-only session. And that can still happen in the third session too.
Sure. Yeah.
And remind them that the front desk staff can't be babysitters when they're bringing, younger children and just leaving them there. It's like, I end up taking back the younger children too because you can't leave them unattended by themselves.
So the hope is that when there wasn't so much turnover and change in the call center, they were kind of indicating on the phone like, hey, if you can just bring the child. I know it's not always feasible. We reiterate that during intake too, so when we get a parent with 3 kids, I'll say, hey, can we just maybe bring, so they're aware that like if it hasn't been caught through the call center, it's addressed in intake because we struggle doing intake too with 3 kids running around. So we also mention it.
The only thing is that I feel like it does delay the treatment planning because I don't feel ready diagnosing a child that I haven't seen.
Makes sense.
So I usually hold off on treatment planning until the 3rd session when they're both together. So that's just how I've done it.
And we can look into whether or not that's a concern. That seems very reasonable to me, and it makes sense that we would want to lay eyes on a child, and potentially even have that be a part of the planning, right? So, I think that that's fine. That's the way things go. There are some state guidelines that we have to have a treatment plan in place by a certain time frame, so we do need to be mindful that we're doing that. Particularly because it's the first session with you, the kind of second session with Kids Help already, having been through intake. So I'll look into that a little bit more and find out where our boundaries exactly are, but for now I would say keep doing what you're doing with that. It makes sense to have that treatment plan developed once you've actually laid eyes on the child. Yeah.
One thing I like to bring up in our intake sessions when I'm working with or seeing a younger child is letting the parent know right off the bat, hey, this is not just going to be one-on-one therapy between the child and the therapist. You're going to be very much involved. I try to have those conversations at the start so you guys are not having to do that as well. I mean, I'm sure it comes up and parents still think, because sometimes they're like, oh, they're just going to meet one-on-one. Well, no, you're going to be involved. It's really important at this age that you're involved and you're doing the work and they're going to want you there often. So kind of having those up front as well, I think is helpful. And if there's any way that we can word that differently or you guys have anything that would be beneficial to bring up in that intake, I'd be open to that information.
And a lot of the times they come in and they've got really just misinformed understandings of what we do, you know? I mean, they think, well, my child just needs somebody to talk to. And so I think it's breaking down that barrier and just having them understand what we do. It's going to get them where they want to be quicker.
So it's great to be reminded that intake is already sending that message. And I think we also want to keep in mind that depending on where a family is and what their understanding is of what therapy is, that might be a message that they need to continue to keep hearing, especially early on in therapy. So don't be afraid to let that message be heard multiple times. It might just need to be a conversation you return to. So one question I had about this, the parent-only CE is if that 6-year-old kind of threshold makes sense for those of you that are already working with those kids. Does that seem like a good boundary to have the 6 and under be parent-only? Would it make sense to potentially increase that to an older age range, like 7 or 8, or do we leave it where it is? Anybody have any thoughts?
I think it depends on the client. You know, it depends on the child. I just had a 9-year-old, and I think it would be really helpful to have a parent-only session.
We'll just kind of say this is kind of hard to sell a parent-only session a little bit. Like, they're ready to get rolling, so we try, that's where we have to buy them in on, hey, you're part of the process, and they get that, but if we increase it too much, just keep in mind that a lot of times they're coming in crisis. I just want to be mindful of the fact that if we kind of increase that age too much, you know, parents sometimes do struggle with knowing that the child isn't going to be seen until, or really going to start treatment until the 3rd session. So I think we have to be careful on, you know.
Could you just keep it where it's at 6, and then you can do what you guys were talking about earlier, where if you feel like that individual client, then say the next one, let's just have them stay and do the 3rd session individually.
I think that would make sense.
By that time, you'll have a little bit more information of the child, too, where you know if it is developmentally appropriate to gear it towards parent-only session.
And the other thing we indicate to an intake is, you know, when you meet with your therapist, they will let you know who is all going to be involved in treatment and what those sessions will look like. So I leave it very vague, like, hey, if they decide you need a parent-only session, they might do a parent-only session. If they decide they just want to meet with a kid, they might do that. So I kind of make it sound very, like, they will help you decide what's needed at the time so that they don't go in assuming something.
Great. Well, know that now that all of you will likely have these parent-only sessions at some point, let's have this be a conversation we keep coming back to, okay? Whether that's at mental health meetings or collaborations or whatever, we want to make sure that that 6-year-old and under range is appropriate. So if you have feedback, if you have thoughts, let us know.
It's also nice when it does show parent only in our schedule, so you can tell ahead of time. If that's a parent coming only.
And how is
There's
that
a comment that,
I'm making it on a note, so like where the call center puts notes, I just, the appointment notes, so like after my appointment scheduled, I'll just add like, parent knows the next session is a parent only, just so that you guys know we've made them aware.
Great. And then you know the plan. Yep. Okay. Sounds good. All right. Wonderful. Another thing that we're going to talk about right now is the Ages and Stages questionnaire. And like I said, there's 2 versions of it. The social emotional one is one that for those of you that are treatment providers, early on in treatment, you'll have an opportunity to utilize. So here are our 2 versions, and this is where you'll want to look to your folder. I'll be directing you to specific things to look at as we go. So the first one we'll talk about is the Ages and Stages Questionnaire 3. That is the original Ages and Stages Questionnaire, and that's the one that intake is going to be using. It goes all the way up to 5.5, and it looks at lots of different domains we're going to talk about in a minute. The second one is the Ages and Stages Questionnaire Social Emotional version. This one is more specific, and so it's available to you guys to use as a tool, but intake will not be doing it. It goes up until 6 years of age. So in your folders, you should see on the left side of your folder the Ages and Stages Questionnaire, the original one, and then on the right side the Social Emotional version. So if you pull out this packet here, what I've copied off for you guys, and shout out to Lucy, she helped me make all these wonderful folders for you guys today. It's an awesome job. I printed did you go with the 48 and the 60-month versions? Those are really big numbers, but that's 4 and 5 years basically. The first thing to notice about these forms is that if you look kind of closely at the top here, you'll see even though this is called the 48-month questionnaire, it actually goes from 45 to 50 months. So although these are labeled by certain months, there's usually a window of time before and then after that in which you use this specific form. So this is the one that intake's going to be doing. It covers these domains. It looks at communication, gross motor, fine motor, problem solving, and personal social. And for each one of those domains, the parent needs to check. They need to check how often their child is doing something. And they're checking what's usual for their child. So not whether or not they can do something, but they're usually doing something yet. And so they're rating yes, sometimes they're not yet. And then there's scoring that comes with each one of those too. So what I have for you in the stapled version here is for the 48 and the 60 months, you'll see when you get to the end of each one of those that there is an information summary sheet. That's the last page, and so that's what you actually use to score these forms. And so when you're scoring, if a parent says, yes, my child does this, they get 10 points. If they sometimes do, they get 5, and if they don't ever, they get nothing. And so on this rating form, the higher a score a child has indicates a lower level of concern. Does that make sense?
And that's the sheet that'll be in ClinScan, right?
Yes.
So the
this
scoring
is the
sheet is
Clinton.
gonna be.
Yep. Okay. And we'll go over like the actual scoring of that and what all the colors on that information sheet mean in a minute. Okay. So the ASQ-SE then, which is on the right side of your handout here. Again, I printed out for you the 48 and the 60-month questionnaires. There's obviously just one domain because we're only looking at social emotional here. And they like to make it confusing and complex for us. So on this measure, there are slightly different ratings, and higher scores equal a greater level of concern. Really great, right? So the stapled packet I have for you is just the questionnaire. You should also see on that same side then an item response sheet and an information summary sheet. That's going to be your scoring sheet. So for this one, if a parent says that a child often does something, they get a 0. If they sometimes do something, they get a 5. And if they're rarely or never doing something, they get a 10. And another thing that's a little different from the ASQ-SE than the original one is if you look through the rating forms, there's opportunity in the columns for a parent to just check if they have a general concern for that particular question. So if they do have a particular concern, then we're giving them an extra 5 points for that item. So this is more based on parent concern than necessarily like developmental level. If that makes sense. So the thing that's similar about both measures then is the ways in which that information summary sheet is used for scoring. So we have some cutoffs here. So when you add up all those 5s and 10s, based on where a child is falling, there'll be different cutoffs by age, and they'll all be on that individual summary sheet. It says what all of the cutoffs are. And if they fall in the white area, so here's the regular ASQ. We're looking at kind of this part of the information summary here. Let me see. If they fall in the white area, then their development's on track for what we'd expect. If they're falling in the gray, it means they're borderline. So they're close to the cutoff, but they're not quite there yet. That would be an opportunity to review concerns and keep an eye on milestones. If they're falling in the black area on here, that means that they're below developmentally what we'd expect, and that you might want to consider further assessments, or in the case for the social emotional questionnaire, that will help guide what your treatment approach is. On both of the forms, there is an overall responses section that you'll see at the end of them too. The overall responses section doesn't have formal scoring, But it's really just more of an opportunity for parents to kind of check yes or no if that particular area is a concern. And the idea behind it is that all of those questions are just good ones to have future follow-up if parents mark a concern for any of them. All right. So also with the ASQ in your folders here, one thing that intake is going to do on the ages and stages questionnaire, if kids are falling below for any of their milestones, they're going to hand out an activities for children section. There's little handouts that come with these based on age. So it kind of gives activities for what we'd expect a child to be doing or what caregivers can do with their children given that developmental level. So they have these information sheets for both the regular ASQ and ASQ SE. Yeah.
What happens when the parents still aren't arriving to our sessions early enough to complete that, and we're asking them to complete it at the end after we do our IE, and then we're not scoring it at
Sure.
until the end, and then they're gone and we can't give them those sheets?
Sure.
Do we mail them out, especially if they're referred externally, or how would you like us?
Probably give it to the next therapist.
What was that?
You could probably give it to the next therapist. Maybe.
Yeah, I think handing off to the next therapist makes sense.
Okay.
Yeah.
If they're referred out.
Yeah,
But if they're
and these are kind
then
of
you can
kinks
figure out
that
what
we'll figure out as we go
they're-
to what's going to make the most sense. We can think about how we might want to communicate if feedback hasn't been given about the ASQ yet, how we might want to communicate that to the therapist so that they have the heads up and they know. And then on our end, when it comes to triaging, we can just be reassured that if the feedback hasn't been given to the parents yet, that it's still going to be used in the process of determining kind of who gets what cases, and that information will be available to you by the time of your session. Does that make sense?
Just a double check from my perspective for intake. So these are handed out when they come and they're in the waiting room, not like mailed to them? And that process makes sense. And what if a kid comes to me? I see a lot of like young kids that sometimes see me first and then I refer them to intake, right? Is there any process, like it's always going to be intake, right? So it's always going to be if they're establishing their therapy, then when they see you get the office for them.
Yeah, although, so certainly if there's other forms that you want to utilize though, we have them all available on the L drive, okay? So right now, on the L drive here in the continuing education seminar folder in the developmental workshop is the electronic version of the ASQ. I only printed out for you guys the 48 and the 60 month, but it goes down really far. So feel free to pull those off, make copies for yourselves. If there's interest, we can even make the ASQ SE copies, just like we have bins of the regular ASQs at each of the locations. We can do that for the SE one as well, so it's easy to grab. Is that something you think you guys would like?
Yes.
Yeah?
Yes.
Okay, we'll make sure we do that. That sounds good.
I just had one other question for intake. So if you guys look at the, like if you look at the ASQ SE, because they have that extra box where the parent can check, like, is this a concern to you? What might happen is the parents come in the waiting room and they're like in a rush to like filling out boxes and they're like, I'm not gonna, what's this extra box? I'm not gonna check it all the time. And that affects the scoring too.
So that's only the SE though, which
Right.
Intake's not doing.
We won't do
Yeah.
that.
Intake's only doing
Oh.
the
I
ages
did
and
that.
yeah.
That's what I'm
So the goal at the point of intake is to focus more solely on just like the developmental milestones themselves versus the social emotional,
Okay.
and then just figure out if a kid needs to be with a therapist that
Okay.
works with younger children so that cognitively makes sense.
Well, that's for all of us. All I was saying is, when you have the parent fill it out, make sure you explain that extra box because it affects your scoring. It's like an additional 5 points. Okay, like that they check that like it's a concern to me. So you want to do like good psychoeducation with them, like you don't have a hypochondriac parent who's like everything's a concern to them, you know, because it could be like widely like variations and they're like, yeah, it's a concern to me. Like they don't know how to like write as well as, but like they can't hold their pencil for like whatever, I don't know, you know, but behavioral stuff. So like make sure that like it's like with that question, what we mean is it a major issue that you think is an issue, or do you think it's like not that much of an issue?
That's a really good point. And this is a new version of the SEQ SE too, and I don't actually know if in the original version this concern column was one that, like, I don't remember it being there before. So that's just for us in general, like good information to keep in the back of our minds, but also thinking that this is a newer version of the test. We might find just in our everyday practice that our scores are falling a little bit differently than we'd expect. What things do we think about? In these folders, Susan and I put some additional information for you guys. We have a resource handout that some of you contributed to, so thank you for that. So that's this page right here. So this is therapy resources, and on here there are a list of books, there's a list of online trainings and websites, and activities that children, if in that preschool age range, you could do with them in sessions. And so we've been focusing on preschool. A lot of those activities are, I would just kind of describe as for young kids, not necessarily in that specific range. So feel free to utilize those if you want. Susan talked about parent-child interaction therapy, and one of the links on there is for free online training. So if you're interested in learning any more of those things, those are great to check out. We have a zones handout right here. The zones handout is for the zones of regulation. What we have on the L drive in here now in the resource folder is all of the activities for the zones of regulation manual. So if you guys want to print those off and use them with your clients, you can. It's not going to have a description of what the activity actually is, that's in the manual, but you at least have access to like the materials for that if you wanted to print them off. And they have a lot of motion pieces and different things you can utilize. In the L drive itself, there is also another PCIT manual, both the manual and the handouts that you do kind of in tandem with that if you want to pull any of those techniques out. There's different behavior regulation techniques, different emotional strategies, behavioral modification tips for parents when it comes to like ignoring or setting consequences. So check out the therapy tools and resources folder. There's a lot of good stuff in there. Alright, so our lunch came so we can break, but before we do, my final thought to you guys is I know that for some of you, working with younger children is out of your comfort zone. So certainly between this time talking today and our last workshop, it's okay if you're not feeling totally comfortable with seeing this age range yet. We're always learning, we're always stretching ourselves, and that's just fine. But our hope for you is that you have at least a foundation with which you feel like you can really get started. And so my message to all of you, especially if you are feeling nervous about this transition, is to not be freaked out. This is just the first step in what will hopefully be more trainings and ongoing support for you guys. We can use collaboration times for this as well. And you already have so many skills with working with older children that you can certainly apply to these younger age ranges. So hopefully this will be kind of the start to what we develop and build from here. Yeah.
And I would say that for people who haven't worked with the younger kids, and maybe you don't always have access to a playroom, that you can decide what kind of extra tools or play things that you might need, and Catalpa can order those as well. I know I have my own, I'm at 442, so we're not by the therapy playroom, so I have my own stuff right in there. And it's just nice to know that at any age that comes in, I have something that would be suiting them.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And that's a great point too, because if you are used to primarily working with teens, you might just not have the stuff that you would usually use for working with younger kids. So don't be afraid to ask for it if you need it. If you haven't traditionally used the therapy rooms and you want to start, go for it. If there are things you just want to pull from the therapy rooms and bring them into your office for a session, feel free to do that too. We just ask that you then return them in case you go and use the room after. So this might be a little bit of a time where we're all kind of developing a library of resources and tools as we're working together. Any other questions before we break for lunch? One of the things we're hoping to emphasize is that, well, play therapy toys and manipulatives can be helpful. They're not necessary to necessarily being able to do therapy with this age range. So we want to make sure that you feel confident in having other tools that you can use as well, just in your work right in your own office. You want to?
Okay, so some of you are familiar with some of these things, but in case you weren't, I wanted to actually give you a little bit more concrete look at a lot of this is on the tools handout that you have in your folder, and Jillian's got a great description of building the vocabulary for feelings, creating a feelings book, and other suggestions on that emotional development piece. But again, it's not, the kids might be playing with some of your toys in your room, but you'll be working with the parents. So these are some of the actual hard tools that you will want to try to build in your practice, depending on how many kids you see. So this is a fun book, again, not for the parents to buy, but to have something like this. You could even make your own, I guess. I'm always encouraging parents to make their own. So there's just feelings books, which help them to create these feelings books with their kids, working on building that vocabulary. This particular book I like because it breaks it down into the size of the emotions, and then it has a side for what happens that causes the different sizes of emotions, and the other side what they can do. And again, I turn to the happy one, which is, if you feel a little happy, what do you do? Well, keep smiling. So, but it's a little bit more useful when they're on the frustrated page, when they're feeling a little frustrated. In this book, they happen to always suggest taking 3 slow, deep breaths, so they're really pushing us to work with kids on that kind of calming skills. But this is just a nice, again, not just always talking, but having actual visuals and handouts and things you can give parents to be working with them on helping do this and making assignments even to do these things at home. So I like this one in particular, but you can use any kind of tool to build the feelings. When I talk about getting kids to do things and working on those positive behaviors that we want to give them attention for, I'm always encouraging parents just preventatively make the command more fun. Don't just say, go clean your room to a 3 or 4 or 5-year-old, but how to make it fun. And this is, again, another concrete tool I can pull out to show parents ways of making things fun. Like I talked about putting the magic lotion on your hands for pickup time, or just a lot of things, especially for parents that feel like it's going to be too much trouble. If you can make some simple suggestions to make things fun, just to get them rolling, that can be really helpful. So that's just another book. And again, this is full of little things you can copy and hand to parents. And then this was at one of the presentations that Dr. Linda Steffen did not even a few years ago now, but different activities that parents can do with kids for enhancing those executive functioning skills of listening, following directions. So things like playing Simon Says, freeze, a lot of fun games. Again, building that positive relationship with the parents and the kids while they're working on these skills too. So this is another handout that I often give parents. And this goes from infancy all the way to adolescence.
Is that on the L drive?
That will be on the L drive.
It will be on the L drive. And lastly, I just wanted to show that Zones of Regulation book, which again, I've given a couple presentations on that. So, and it's been we have a group on it, so depending on the age level of the child and what they would fit into. But this is another great tool to use in addition to the other things needed to help with those emotional regulation skills. All right, so that, and again, on our panel, everyone's got a lot of other tools to talk about too, so we'll see who wants to go first and talk about that. Or if you have any questions.
So in addition to those tools you can utilize, there's also a lot of things that you can make too. So to kind of complement the zones of regulation, when we're thinking about emotional intensity and recognizing that and ranking it a little bit better, one of the things that I have that I bust out in therapy a lot, but that I also sometimes make with my younger therapy clients too, is an emotion thermometer. And this has a little piece of paper on the inside, so it can go up or down. And so if you have a child where even just like basic 1 to 5 numbers or kind of level of intensity is difficult, all they have to do is slide this to kind of get an appreciation for what that's like. And so that can be a fun activity to kind of make it together and have them take it home and start using it and practice it and incorporate it into your sessions. All of the resources, the ones in the folders and the ones you see on the L drive, are really contributions from all of us. You guys provided us with an awesome start to different activities and materials, and my hope is that we can build that together. So as all of you are experimenting with these younger kids, if you come across an activity that you think is great, please email it to me and I will add it to the L drive and to that folder so that everybody can have it as a resource. Okay. So I was hoping we could just kind of open up the floor to you all to be able to ask any questions you have or share any thoughts, maybe share things you're excited about, things that you're concerned about. We are all up here collectively just to kind of answer questions you might have. I'm hoping as things come up that there might be particular case examples along the way and experiences that we have had that we can just kind of share with you all to get a sense of things. But I'm just going to open it up generally. Anybody have any questions?
I had a question for the panel. So, like a lot of kids I work with, younger kids are more visual learners and kinesthetic learners than they are verbal, right? So a lot of those kids, especially like I say a lot of kids with ADHD, all the kids with ADHD, right? Do you guys find that sometimes you try to talk to them, you try to like tell them things or tell the parents, and then they get home, they're like, yeah, it didn't work, or like, oh no, we didn't remember that, it like doesn't stick? Do you find that it's helpful sometimes when you're doing the therapy to actually do the role playing or act it out or do it in the session where you're like, okay, we're gonna play this game where like your sister takes your toy and like, what are you gonna do about it? Like, what's the better thing to do? Do you find that it helps to do it in session and to like do it more kinesthetically or do it more actively?
I do a lot of role plays. A lot of times I'll have them flip. So like the parent is the child and the child is the parent, and then they kind of either like act out what they need to do, or I'll be the child. Just so that they can kind of have that, because if they haven't done it, they're not gonna be able to pull it out when they're at home or at school or anywhere else. So definitely I try to do it in my office. Not only the games, but role plays, things like that.
Piggybacking off of that, I'll do like a timeout role play. So we'll give a stuffed animal in my office a timeout and practice how to do that. What our roles will be, we talk about that too, and then practice that. Ask them as homework to practice timeouts every day.
I do the same thing. I make coping boxes with my kids, so we have all different things that the kids can go to and use, and we'll put it in my office in a special place before they take it home. And they get to practice their mad face and their worried face, and then they have to walk over to the coping box, pull out something of the coping box and use it, and then we go down the feeling thermometer till they feel better, and then we practice again, and probably about 7 more times. And then they earn their coping box where they get to take it home after we make it, too. And they show me how to use it.
You know, there are two things that I think are really useful about doing those activities in the moment in session. And the first one is that, you know, they are practicing these often in a more neutral state. And in general, that's helpful for all of our clients, regardless of the age range. And I think it's especially helpful for those younger children where emotions are just so much of an automatic response that they're still really learning how to gauge and control. So if they can start to practice these skills when they're in a more neutral state, the hope is that then they can then generalize to when they are more distressed or anxious about something. I think another thing important to keep in mind about preschool is your example really nicely highlighted the concept of theory of mind, getting into another person's perspective and being able to recognize that others have different thoughts and feelings that are separate from myself. And in typical development, that's something that comes online right around 4 years of age, which is right around when preschool is. So being able to act out those things in session together is also helping them to foster that skill that we want them to be developing and showing more and more of right then.
Mm-hmm. But not everybody knows what they're thinking.
Right.
And has the same feelings.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
On the reverse of that, though, I do a lot of psycho-ed with parents about your child is not a little adult. Because I get that one a lot, where parents are like, why don't they just do this. I'm like, they're 5 and that's not fun. So that's why. Or I get that one a lot where parents will ask their 5-year-old why they didn't do something or why they did do something. And so I try to have them sort of pull back on the why questions, because I say we don't really care why, and if they say I don't know, they're probably being honest with you. They really don't know why they did something. So just kind of framing it that way and helping them understand external motivation versus internal motivation, and that a 5-year-old's not going to do the dishes just because it's making them a better human being, but it's because you told them they could get a cookie afterwards. And that tends to help if I can sort of get parents on their level a little bit.
Yeah, that reward conversation is hard with parents who really think kids should just do things that they're asked to do.
Yeah, I'm bribing them for doing it, and I
For
say
doing
you
things I
bribe
expect
yourself
them to do,
for
right.
doing the dishes by letting yourself watch TV afterwards, so
Some
you're
of the
just
most
defining it
challenging
differently.
clients are parents.
Oh, yeah.
It's helpful sometimes with those rewards to let them know that it doesn't have to cost money, because I think parents think they have to buy all these toys to encourage their child to do things, but you know, they get to pick a game to play after dinner, they get to pick maybe a dinner during the week, they get, you know.
Even reward or like praise, even just you being extra encouraging and excited. Kids like to make their parents proud.
And 3-year-olds actually love stickers. They
Oh, yeah.
actually
Smoke
love
them
them.
throw their way. And I think that too is important with younger kids, is the immediacy of the reward. Because parents will come in with these elaborately designed charts where after 2 weeks the kid gets to go bowling, and I'm like, you lost them. Hand them the cookie and let them go. But little things like that, because parents will again think like adults and go, if my kid can wait till Friday to have 5 good days of school, and I'm like, scale it back. They're not thinking that far ahead. They're losing you.
And I would say consequences work the same way.
Same way, yeah. Don't take away the toys for a week. Your kid's forgotten why they lost it by day 2.
Or then they don't care because they lost it. Yeah.
And you really want it to be close to what they're able to do. Like it can't be so far out. So if the kid has meltdowns 5 times a day, well then you're going to have to do something more often than that. Right.
I think scaffolding is a big piece of our work with parents and the kids. You know, parents kind of come in with this end goal in mind often, which is quite a few paces off from where a child might actually be. And then our role really becomes, how do we like take those baby steps to get there so the child can feel success? And then the parents can also experience it working as well.
And when they set up those charts, make sure that they think that their child has at least a 50-50 shot of being successful within the first couple of days. Because if you have a reward system where the child's not earning the reward the first day, that's not good. If it's even the second day and they haven't, they've already lost it. I'm never going to get this reward, I don't care. You have a question?
Do you have any activities that foster more of like the relationship and attachment at that age? Especially when like the parenting has been so difficult that the kids need kind of some attachment type?
I use a lot of TheraPlay, which has a bunch of great activities that just focus in on the parent-child relationship. And so I will spend an entire session just doing those activities, like with us and the parent and the child. And it shifts that relationship. It shifts the way parents see their kids. And
like, do you have a resource? Like, for like a...
Like, for example.
Give
me more.
So a couple, I'm just trying to think off the head. Like, this I know sounds really ridiculous, but we use a lot of like breathing things too. So we will blow bubbles, and we will blow one bubble and then blow it back and forth. Again, it kind of like fosters the eye contact, and then just the back and forth and the praise, and oh, you did it, you got it back to me. Blowing a feather back and forth. Doing a beanie drop, so you have the beanie on their head, and then you say, okay, when I say giraffe, you get to drop it into my hands. And so you're like making eye contact the whole time, and again, it kind of helps to reinforce that impulse control, because you're not doing giraffe right away, you're saying like monkey, and elephant, and then you do giraffe, and then it's, you know, it's a big party when you do it. And it's just simple games like that, and it doesn't seem like you're doing a whole lot, and sometimes I'll have parents like, really? That's what we're doing? Betcha! That's what we're doing the whole time.
That makes me think about how co-regulation is really important too, and how kind of guiding parents through this idea of co-regulation and helping your child to soothe, because they might be at a developmentally appropriate level in which they get upset sometimes, and we all do, and that's okay. But doing those kind of activities can really help with that. And there's actually a bunch of them online. If you like Google co-regulation games or activities, you'll look at a lot of good stuff. I think somebody else had a idea.
That was kind of my question about PCIT. So, like, when you're ignoring a child because you don't like their behavior, is there any, like, backup or follow-up to make sure that you're not unintentionally sending them the message of, like, what you're feeling is not okay? So, like, I'm ignoring you because I don't like that behavior. But, like, is there follow-up then when the child's calm and fine, and you can say, you know, when you were doing that, you seemed kind of mad. You know what I mean?
I try to stress that the parent needs to build their own self-awareness around that stuff too. Because that can lend to that reaction from the kid. So it's both. You know,
And I think being mindful of your nonverbals. If your nonverbals are saying, like, I don't like you, then it's gonna miss the point of ignoring their behavior. It's gonna miss the mark.
I have parents do a lot of just like thinking out loud with that stuff. So, wow, you are really mad, but we don't throw toys. And I get, you know, you get a warning then. And if you don't change the behavior after one warning, I'm going to ignore you now until you can use the toys appropriately or whatever. You know, I wouldn't use the word appropriate with a 5-year-old, but until you can be nice with the toys or something. And then the parent would go about ignoring. And then the kid stops doing the behavior. Wow, great job fixing that. And then they can resume what they're doing. But I actually encourage a lot less talk with little kids because parents want to lecture and the kid doesn't really get it. So just show it and give it a little short thing so they know what behavior that you didn't like and they don't repeat it, right?
Because they kind of forget it pretty quickly. Like you guys said, they don't really know why they did something, and they probably can't remember earlier in the day what happened.
Yeah, I don't know that in the PCIT they're ignoring during that 5 minutes of they're trying to play with those specific things. Ignoring isn't generally, I mean, I think it's very situational whether or not as a parent you would recommend ignoring this or as Gina said, saying, yeah, you're really mad, but we don't throw toy, you know. So it really just depends on what makes the most sense in the situation. But if that was your question, the reason why they were talking about ignoring it in that for PCIT was because they were specifically trying to just focus on the positive.
And I think part of the ignoring is also redirecting. So then, like, engaging in a more positive activity. So you can still be engaging and being like, look at what I'm doing. And then you're still being positive, but you're just not acknowledging their naughty activity. So I think the redirection part was also a big piece of it, wasn't it?
Yes.
Yeah.
If we're working on kind of ignoring a behavior in my office, so I'll tell parents just to weigh it and then make a very clear statement about what they want to see so the kid knows what we're looking for. Because I think sometimes parents will say stop, but the kid doesn't know what to do then if they stop almost. So I'm waiting, I'm going to talk to you, but I'm going to wait till your feet are both on the floor. And then I think that helps.
I think that's a good point, because I think as parents, and I'm a parent, we're all parents, right, when you get upset. But parents, like, there's no manual, but they don't get taught to focus on the alternative behavior instead. And so what you guys are all saying is focus on, like, instead of doing it in a negative way, saying it in a positive way, I don't like when you do this, this is what we do instead. Like, harping on teaching them alternative behaviors so they have it, because this is their go-to. Like, they grow up, that's all they know. And the parent says, like, calm down, they're like, what's the first step of calm down? I don't know what that is. And I think it's how they say it. So when I try to talk to parents, because I see parents and kids all the time, and, like, sometimes I have to ignore a lot of stuff because I got, like, both brothers who also have ADHD, and they're showing my mind, and I'm just like, okay. I'm a psychiatrist, I don't get to see every week, so, like, we're just gonna talk for whatever. But when I talk to parents, I talk about, like, it's not what you say, it's how you say it. Okay? And so it's like the tone and it's how you approach kids. And so sometimes if they can keep their, like you said, their level of emotion down a notch, even if they have to in their mind for a second, if their kid's not assaulting somebody or running in the street, they can take 20 seconds in their mind, not respond, and just go, like, bring themselves down from anger to frustrated, and then approach the child, and then try to fully understand where the kid's coming from. Because a lot of kids, sometimes, they're just misconnecting the dots. Like, you know, they're 5 and they're like freaking out and being overwhelmed about something, and if you just slow down and you try to not approach the situation against your parental instincts to be like, what's the problem, how do I fix it, because I gotta get out the door, but let me slow down and try to fully understand where they're coming from and what their perspective is and what the child's thinking. Let me just give them the benefit of the doubt. Wait, what's going on? I notice, like Gina said, I notice you're getting angry. Don't get in that cyclical conversation with an irrational 4-year-old. It's like beating their head against the wall. It's just gonna hurt. Don't bite on that, like, the kid's like, you never let me go to this place, you never ever. And you want to be like, we went there yesterday. But instead, tell them the emotion you're seeing and just keep it simple, keep the tone down, and say, okay, I know, buddy, but like, too angry. No, too frustrated. I know. Stop. Slow down. Just tell me what's going on. I won't tell you what to. Just slow down. Tell me what's. I'll listen. Just you have to stop. Tell me what's going on. And like just listen to your kids more and hear them more and see their perspective and approach a situation of like, what are they feeling, where they're at, come down to their level and feel with them. Understand the situation first before giving advice. Like I think it's in the approach that parents sometimes, because they get frustrated. And one thing I really like that Dr. Ilstraker said, that transition magician thing, I think what was best about that, and I try to talk to parents about this, it's like the playfulness. It's like that, it's that enthusiasm, it's the way they say things. Like when my 5-year-old gets upset and he doesn't want to go to sleep, and he jumps on his bed and then all he is like rolling around in his bed sheets, I was like, oh, where did Nolan go? All I see is an ostrich. His head's buried in the sand. Like, buddy, where are you at? And he can be like screaming and then he's like laughing. Or if I have like a 5-year-old who gets anxious and overwhelmed, and they're like, there's monsters in my room. I try to tell parents, don't try to reassure them. Like, try to not be like, oh, you're overblowing it. You're getting too anxious about that. Because it doesn't always validate their feeling. Like, but I feel that way. That's funny. You know? And so I actually tell them, like, roll with the anxiety. Like, approach your, wait a second. Like, just, they're afraid of the dark. Like, just stay there. Like, go grab a flashlight. And then like, no, we have to look. And like army crawl to the closet and like, you know, do you see a monster? And then you grab a shirt and you're like, the monster's got me, it's on my head, it's on my head. And 5-year-olds are so literally concrete that they'll just be like, Dad, it's not a monster, it's my shirt, it's just my shirt. And you're like, thank you for saving me, buddy. Like, you're right, we looked all around your room. I didn't see any monsters. Did you? Like, I don't think they're here. Like, come down to your kids' level.
Talking about anxiety, we've talked a lot about behavioral kids, but you will get anxious 3-year-olds, and not just separation anxiety. So if you're needing ideas, I don't want to take up all the time that we have left with all the things that we do, I'm sure, but ask about those kids too, because those kids can be kind of tricky. If you're trying to think about like CBT that you'd usually use for an older child, how you would apply that to a younger kid. But I think everybody up here probably has some good ideas for that too, because they don't just tantrum, they do a lot of other stuff. And worry in a 5-year-old looks a lot different than worry in a 15-year-old.
That's a great point.
Yeah, it looks behavioral a lot of the time.
It looks like tantrums.
Yeah.
Yep. No sounds. And parents are still at very much a comfort stage with younger kids like that too, so there's kind of this
Just reassure like crazy, yeah. We'll just reassure all day long and then we'll be used up for them.
So we don't have the setup here to strictly adhere to the PCIT true model. What I have done in my practice is I have taken those techniques and I've modified them, and I'm in the role of the parent the whole time rather than the bug in the ear. We were moving to having that set up here, but I didn't actually like put that into full action. So usually, you know, the whole thing with the PCIT manuals, even the ones that are online and accessible to you, I'll incorporate those as themes in my session. So there may be, based on the goals that you have, other things you're incorporating too. But I just sometimes use a red flag for parents.
Paris Goodyear Brown also has some really good books on like parent-child therapy and relationship-based. Paris Goodyear Brown. There's a lot of really good books on like in-session activities for parents and children.
And if you're not sure what to do, one really good thing to do is sort of narrate your play. If the kid isn't talking or not very verbal, you can kind of just talk about what you're doing.
So I want to be mindful of time. We could keep going forever, but we'll wrap things up for now. And please keep this conversation going into our collaborations, bringing younger cases in so that we can all keep talking and having conversations about it. Thank you for coming.